Okay, so this week's lecture, what I want to talk to you, I think I have two subjects here today. So I have one unit that I'm going to talk about that's related to how time and change is represented in a Revit model. It sounds a little strange. We maybe think of the model as being kind of static, but within Revit there's a few tools to kind of represent that passage of time or the flow of time within a project. So that's one of the topics that I want to cover. And then the other topic is related to unique forms. And we've kind of discussed this a little bit in class, but unique form in relation to, we've made component families, but there's also making in-place families. And that's more about a really unique form within a project to capture some contextual kind of things, where if you make a component outside of the project, you don't have context to reference. So sometimes in-place models are a way to capture something in context. So I'm going to cover both of those things. So let's go back to the, let's start with the time aspect. So the first two that I want to talk about are kind of actually, you know, they're pretty easy to understand. Then the third one's a little bit more abstract. So the first one that we might want to talk about when we're thinking about time is how, say, for example, time passage during the day, how we would mark that or how we would see that in our project. And that's really about the movement of the sun through the sky. So you can see how that would be kind of important. So in this building, you know, there's these sunshade things on here, and you can see they're shadowing the windows. And, you know, do they shadow the windows through the whole day, through the whole year? How does the sun passage, how does the sun affect this building? So there's a way to set up an animation. So this is, you know, this happens to be set to not have an animation right now, but I could set up an animation for this and give it a date and a time range, you know, sunrise to sunset, etc. So then we could explore the passage of time. In class, I'll go into a little bit more detail about how you would actually set something like this up. But once we have it set up and we get it exported out to a movie file, so let me open the one that I want to see here. So there's this movie file that we have, and let me go ahead and play it for you so you can see kind of what the result is. So now you see, obviously it's at sunset, I guess, because it's at the end of the movie here, but when we start it, it'll switch around and go from sunrise to sunset. So this is one day on June 6th or whatever I had it set to. And let me hit play and let it go. So you see the sun coming up, and now you see the shadows moving across the building, and you can see the sunshades come right to the underside of the sill and then back down. So we know that we provided shade for this building during the whole day, at least on that particular day. And I think this was probably set at a solstice. So we know that that's the highest point in the sky for the sun, so that's what we need to protect against. So anyhow, that's one example of how we can kind of capture time within our model, is by using some type of solar study. So that's just, and we set a time range that we want to look at. So the other one, the other animation, and it's an animation that we might use, that we might capture time, is how somebody, a person, might move through space around the building, space and time, as they move around the building. So we can create an animated walkthrough of our building to kind of simulate that passage of time as somebody moves through the space. So again, that's another animation. So we set the animation up, we set the camera, we tell it where we would like it to go, what we would like it to look at as it travels, and then we export that file and use it in our presentation to show the passage of time. So I have another one of those set up, so let me pick that one here, and I will show a walkthrough animation. So this one happens to be, these take a little bit longer to create. So the sun study didn't take too terribly long because the building is kind of static, but a walkthrough like this does take a good amount of time. So I just have it on a hidden line mode. They can be done as realistic or fully rendered. It just takes a very long time to do. So this one here, just in hidden line mode, probably took about 20 minutes to render, maybe a little bit longer than that. And you can see I'm going to get like 20 seconds out of this. So let me go ahead and hit play and let it go, and you'll see what it does. So there we are, we're just flying around the front side of the building here and coming down the front of it, and then we'll eventually go in through the front door here. So again, this is just capturing kind of the time within our project, right? So there's a couple of examples of kind of more concrete examples, I guess, of how time can be represented in our project, or how we can kind of get that across. So let me go ahead and come back to Revit here, and I'm going to go to a plan view to talk about the last one. Let me zoom out a bit here, and I'm gonna use some space out in the middle of my courtyard here, because I don't even know if I have this set up for this. So the last way that we can represent time is a little bit more abstract, but actually probably more important in the scheme of how it relates to constructing the model and building the project. And that is the idea of time passing, of phases of building a project, right? So you might have, you know, on any given project, you might have an existing state, a demolition state, and a new state of a particular building. And you want to capture all of that, all of those states of being for these elements within one project, and then represent them in some particular way. So like I say, this actually doesn't have it set up. So let me open a new file. Maybe it'll be easier to show that. So let me close this one out, and I'm not going to save anything here. And I'm going to make a new project. And I'll do this in class 2 so we can all go at it a little bit slower and we can understand. So I'm just going to quickly make a building like this. And let's say that this particular little footprint here, that's my existing building. It's going to exist before we come to the site. So we have all these properties on a wall, right? So we know how big it is, how tall it is, all of those things. But down at the bottom of the properties list, let me expand my properties window here. So down at the bottom of the properties list, there's actually a phase created and phase demolished piece as well. So this is what's capturing the time of my element. So in this case, let's say that all of these walls here, all were existing. So they weren't created during a phase new construction. These things were created during a time that was existing. And what happens is, as soon as I do that, they go gray here on my screen. And now if I create another wall, let's say I add one in here that's like that, that wall is now darker than the other ones, and it's listed as new construction, right? So the elements themselves have a position along a timeline, and that position along the timeline is now manifesting itself in some way here. And let's just say that my particular project called for a section of this wall to get demolished out. So I'm going to just make a split here to show the piece that I want demolished out. So I'm going to split it from here to here. We'll just say that's where the opening is going to occur. And then once we make the opening, we'll have some new walls that are going to enclose that side as well. All right, so if I turn chain on, there we go. So we might have that enclosed. So that's some new piece. And so in addition to when the phase that this item was created, so like that wall there, the phase that it was created was during the existing phase, well, it lists that it hasn't ever been demolished. But if I would like to demolish that item, I can set the phase demolished, or I think I can use the demolish tool. There's a demolish tool here that will let me demolish that wall. And now that item not only has a phase created, but it also gets a phase demolished control or parameter as well. So again, we're tracking that item's existence along a timeline. So now all of a sudden we have a project that is somehow capturing time. So if I was to look at this, so let me make a couple of copies of this. So let me duplicate the view, and let me duplicate one more time. Duplicate this again. And I'm going to make one of these, rename it, and I'll call this level 1 existing. And there's a guy vacuuming out here behind me. If you hear it, that's what it is. So, okay. So level 1 existing. And we'll call this one level 1 demolition. And I'll call the last one just level 1. So now I have 3 level 1 plans that are all looking at different points along the timeline. So if I come back to this view, so if I choose this view and I say really that should be a view that I would like to not show, I don't necessarily, this isn't in the phase new construction, or I don't necessarily want to show everything in this view. Since it's just the existing, I would like it to show only the existing. So let me find that. Let me set something else here. And so now I'm looking at that project, or that this project with at the existing point in time, and I want it to show me everything that is there. So this wall out here and whatever that wall that I added in there that I'm going to build in the future, they're currently not seen because I'm only looking back in time at what this thing looked like. So now if I want to move forward to demolition, so here I want to actually see this existing stuff grayed out, and I want to see that demolished wall, but I don't want to see the new stuff. So instead of show me all, I'm going to ask it to show me previous plus the demolished. So now I have a picture of what this building looks like when I arrive to the site and what's going to need to be demolished out. Right? And my last one, just my level 1 plan. Here, I'd like to see what's existing, and I'd like to see what's new, but I don't necessarily want to see this demolished. So instead of showing me all, I'm going to ask it, what does this look like when I'm totally done with my project? And now I have this picture. So the phasing tools in Revit are a way to flag an element with a parameter or with a property that places it along the timeline, and also it places it along the timeline, and also we can choose to demolish it or remove it from a timeline at a certain point in time. And then after we set that up, then we can tell the particular views, so level 1 plan, level 1 demolition, and level 1 existing, we can tell a particular view to look only at a certain point in time and only show me certain objects that are flagged in certain ways. So in this way, we can capture a project kind of in its entirety and capture all these phases of a project. So that's the third way that we can kind of capture time. Like I say, it's a little bit more abstract than the solar study where we animate the sun moving through the sky, or the walkthrough where we animate a camera moving through space. Those two are really, really concrete and understandable, where this phasing concept is a little bit more abstract, but definitely something that is probably the most common and most encountered as you develop construction documents or as you develop your projects in Revit, especially in a professional setting. This kind of thing starts to become really important, and the way that we control visibility, just yet another way to control the visibility of elements inside of a view. So that kind of covers the subject that I wanted to talk about, or the unit 19, or whatever unit number it is, the unit that's about time as it relates to your projects. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, or I wanted to talk about, was this idea of unique form. So we've talked about making component families if we have something unique and custom that we want, but there is always going to be something that doesn't necessarily lend itself to be in a component family. So it's something that you need to have context on. So having context helps you make that object. So let me come up with an example here. So I'm going to work off to the side here. Let's do that. So say I know that this is one that we have to do with a in-place family, so I'll do it. So let's say I have that wall like that, and I want to put some kind of hole through the middle of it. So I want to have an opening through the middle of this. So I might try something like the opening tool, and if it's just a rectangular opening, that would probably work. So it does, right? I could create an opening like that. But if I wanted that opening to be something other than a rectangular kind of shape, say it had an arched top or something like that, I don't have the ability to do that. Now normally if I have a straight wall like this and I want an arched top opening, I might do something like this. I might do edit profile and I might draw in that shape, right? So I could edit the profile, give it an arch like this, and do something like that. And let me split this, clean it up. So I might do something like that to create an arched opening in a wall. I can't do that over here because when I select this, I don't have edit profile, so I can't do that. So I want to create that kind of opening, but I can't do it using an edit profile. So this is one of those things where I really want to have this wall in context. I want to be able to work with that wall and do something with it while I create my in-place family to represent that hole that's going through there. So being able to make something while I'm here helps me out. So this time I'm going to do an in-place model, and it doesn't really matter what it is. I'll just make it a generic model, and in this case I want a hole to go through there. So instead of these solids, I'm going to actually use a void form, and I'm going to do a void extrusion, and I need a work plane here. I think I have to bail out of this. Let me create a work plane to sketch on. So to get a work plane here, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to give myself a reference plane. So something out here in front of it, just so I have a place to sketch, and I'll give this thing a name so I can pick it later. Okay, and now I'll go back to that 3D view because I like that. All right, now I'll try my in-place model. And I'm going to set my work plane, and I'll pick by name. So there's my, okay, and I'll just show it so people can see where I'm drawing. All right, so there it is. And now I can do a void extrusion, and I can get right on the bottom of my wall here, so I can use that. So I can draw my item up, and then draw my arc like this, like so, and then draw a line down to complete this thing. I gotta draw across the bottom because I'm doing a, there we go. got to complete the whole thing, so I'm going to go around over there. Okay, and I'll finish that, and then let me go back up to 3D to see what we have here. So I have this kind of little plane, this void, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to use this void as a cutting element. So if I pull this back through there, so now you can see that void is passing through that wall, and now I can do something like this. I can tell it I'd like to cut this void from that wall, and now I have that opening passing through that wall. Right, so now I could finish that up. So now I've created that. So that's an example of a unique form that I really actually need something. I wanted to make it in my project because I needed to have that wall. I needed to cut that wall with the void. So I really have to have that there. So in place elements are really something that you use when you need to reference something else. So, you know, and I did a void there, but there's no reason why you can't do solids as well. So on your model in place, and let's say I want to pick a wall. So I'll pick a wall that's a little bit more of a challenge to do, right? So let's say we have a wall that I'm going to do a blend. And you'll see what I'm talking about when I get done here. And I want it to come off of the edge of this wall. So again, I need something to I wanted that wall as kind of a reference. So I'm going to do something like this. And I can constrain it. So I constrain that edge. That edge is locked to that edge. And then I'll do something like this. I'm going to edit the top. And I'll do, well, let's do a rectangle again. So I'll do something like this. Okay, and I'll lock these again. I want to lock that, lock that, lock that. Those look good. And then I want it to be 20 feet tall, so because I think that's the height of these other walls here. So I drew a bottom ring, so that's that lower one. It kind of went gray. Now I drew a top ring. So if you imagine these two things set apart from one another by 20 feet, and now when I finish this, now it gives me this kind of wedge. Whoops, finish up the model. So it gives me this wedge-shaped wall. So that's another use for an in-place family, is you can get objects. So in this case, a system family, right? So a wall is always rectangular. It's always a sandwich of stuff, and you can't ever really make it thicker at the bottom than at the top. So an in-place family is a way that you can do something like this. And I still have constraints associated to it. So if I move that, the edge of that wall moves. If I was making that as a component family, A, I couldn't choose the wall category, and B, I'd have a real hard time creating constraints between objects like this. So since it's a system family, or since it's a wall category, you know, it still accepts things like doors. I can still cut them in there. It might act a little funny, right? You don't know exactly how it's going to act. So I'll put the door way out there and made it, you know, maybe I wanted the door back on this side. So there are some issues with them, and they can be difficult to work with sometimes. So let's see what happens if I do a window. It does kind of the same thing, right? So they can be a little bit unpredictable, but they can help you out in a pinch, and they can get these kind of unique shapes that you can't get any other way. So if you can't figure out a way to model it, more than likely creating a model in place, choosing a category for that thing to be in. So once you choose your category, now you can access solids and voids to create almost anything you can imagine. So between these, you should be able to get just about anything. There's a few shapes you may not be able to get to, and of course it doesn't. I just did one thing, but you can always come back and you can add other pieces. So you know, if I wanted other extrusions on top of this, you know, maybe there's these things that sit up on top. See if I can't get Let's do this. Set my work plane. Let's try that. There we go. All right, so I want to put something up on top here. So I can build the little piece up here. So there's no reason why you have to be limited to one solitary piece of geometry. You can add other things in. So let's say those are a few things I needed. And so now I have those that are created. Maybe I need them a little bit taller. I need them to be 5 feet or something. And I'll finish up the model. So now that's kind of all one object that has different pieces associated with it. So you can do that with in-place models as well. So the thing to kind of caution you about with in-place models is you need to be a little bit sparing with them. They can be taxing on your project. So it takes a lot to regenerate these and create the relationships and things like that. So use them sparingly. Don't use them all the time. If you can make a component family, if you don't need context, try to make a component family out of it, because it's much more lightweight and easily regenerated. The other thing about this is it's stuck in the project. I can't access this from a library. I can't save this out. I can't do anything with it. The only thing I can do is I can cut and paste it to another project, but that has its own problems. So when you make an in-place model, understand that it's in that project only. You can't transfer it to other projects with transfer project standards or anything like that. You really need to cut and paste or stuff like that. So it's a good tool to have, to understand, to know that you can do, and you can create things with it, and a lot of times you create really fast things with it. But know that if you have an opportunity to make a component family, you're probably going to be better off in the long run doing that rather than filling up your project with a bunch of in-place models. So that's what I've got for this week with as far as the lecture. So the idea of how we track time in a project, and the idea of unique form and in-place models. So we will see you next time.